Alt tab, right arrow, left arrow. And we are streaming this live on Facebook and YouTube, so this will be available. We have the audio working. Yesterday's audio didn't work. Sorry about that. So if you went back and watched it and just saw me, something didn't work. I'm good. I'm good here. Great. So we're going to talk about Main Street innovation hubs in small and rural communities. We're going to talk about innovation. We're going to talk about how it's different in rural. We're going to talk about how small businesses and entrepreneurs thrive in rural and how much it's different than in urban. And then we're going to talk about how we believe locations like this can have an oversized impact in your communities. So I'm Brad Addig, and I'm with an organization called Foundry Collective. We are a nonprofit created a couple years ago, focused exclusively on rural and small towns, primarily through helping create sustainable locations like this in partnership with people like Christine and Lisa. We'll talk a little more about that. My background is 20-some years. I'm a fourth-generation Oregonian. I grew up in a small rural community in Willamette Valley, Harrisburg. I think there were 43 people in my graduating class. I'm an example of one of those people that moved away, okay, and spent time in San Francisco, Minneapolis, Chicago, and New York City, and came back about 7 years ago. And I'm in the North Albany, Corvallis area. So I spent a lot of my formative years in Eastern Oregon, hunting, fishing, rock hounding, and all of those. I love coming over here. So I'm happy to be over here anytime I get a chance. So we're here because of a generous grant through the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, which is the largest philanthropic organization in the United States that focuses on entrepreneurship. We partner with Rural Development Initiatives, a nonprofit that's been working in Oregon and Southeast and Southwest Washington for 27-some years. Kelly Nonprofit Consulting is another partner in this endeavor with this work we're going to be doing for the next 18 months. And then our partners, NEOEDD, Ignite, the City of LeGrand, the county, Business Oregon is a strong supporter of this. I love starting with this quote: entrepreneurship has been the lifeblood of rural economies. And it has, and it remains to be so. So if you're a small business person, a lot of times small business people don't consider themselves entrepreneurs. You're probably the most entrepreneurial group in a community. You're the ones that say, today I'm going to change a sign in my front window. I'm going to pull this forward. I'm going to create a new event. I'm going to do something. So you are constantly changing and evolving and trying new things to grow your business, support your community, and scale. So why are we going to talk about innovation first? And you might notice some photos here. I tried to make sure I got photos of the surrounding area in here. Because innovation propels small businesses and small communities forward. Innovative communities are significantly stronger and have better local self-reliance than communities that are not addressing challenges with innovative solutions. And, micro enterprises, so these are businesses with 5 employees or less and $1 million in income or less, make up 90% and almost all net job growth. And that percentage of micro enterprises has been higher in rural. Some studies will show 93, 94% of your business, of what's comprised here in a rural community are micro enterprises. They create almost all net job growth. And what we have found, and studies pointed to, is that small businesses and entrepreneurs and innovators that get the right amount of technical support and assistance have a 30% better chance of being successful over 5 years. We know that only about 50% of small businesses and startups survive that 5-year level. So your chances and odds are increased by coming to events like this, getting contact with people like Lisa and Christine, taking advantage of the Small Business Development Center, understanding all of the resources that are available to you from state agencies like Business Oregon. So here's a question. Is innovation different in small and rural communities? If someone could turn that mic on back there, anybody care, just press that button and it should go in a minute, turn green. Anybody care to talk a little bit about innovation, why innovation might be different, what you think innovation is, why it's different in rural communities?
Can you clarify how you're defining it?
So innovation is the process of coming up with new ideas and new solutions to problems that exist. Entrepreneurship is that ability to take those ideas and actually make a business out of them. So innovation, you have to have innovation in order to have entrepreneurship. So we're talking about that idea, new ideas, new ways to solve problems, not thinking, we like to say coloring outside the lines or thinking outside the box. I prefer to say there are no lines, there is no box, okay? But any ideas about how you might think that innovation is different in rural locations than it is in urban locations?
It's got to be different because the people in rural locations have to solve problems all the time. You've grown up solving problems.
Absolutely. That's the perfect answer. Innovation in the United States up until the 1950s, almost all of it occurred in rural, okay? Because it was wrapped around manufacturing and agriculture, okay? It's only since like the 1960s where we've started talking about larger communities, larger cities, urban innovation hubs. And part of that is how we measure innovation, okay? We measure innovation by number of patents per capita, okay? So we measure innovation differently, and we don't necessarily, in a lot of cases, think how innovative rural has been and how innovative rural is. And in a lot of cases, you have to solve your own problems, okay? So if innovation is different, and we know it is, how does it impact local entrepreneurship? We're going to explore that a little bit. So innovation in small towns is different, okay? First and foremost, a lot of times it starts with a home-based business, okay? Secondly, it usually ends up with some kind of a product or a service or an improvement in some kind of a product or service. These are usually driven by you as entrepreneurs or innovators or small businesses, either identifying a problem or having a problem and finding ways to incrementally improve that so that you can be slightly more competitive or make a slightly higher margin or a slightly higher profit. And you can't find a solution that works for you, so you create your own solution. Also, these are usually, as I said, modest changes. They make your company or your service or what you're doing more viable, but they're incremental. In urban, typically it's a collective effort, okay? Universities, tech centers, large companies coming together to create some major transformational change. It's usually patentable. Patents are expensive, okay? It's a formal system in most cases to create this innovative new thing. And again, patents, okay, it's usually patentable. Corvallis is one of the most innovative cities in the United States because of the number of patents held by the university and by Hewlett-Packard. That's an interesting way to measure this. And it takes a lot of resources and a lot of money. So we know we're different. Okay, what can we learn? Well, we can learn from some of the things that have happened in the past. Steve Case, who is the ex-CEO of AOL, did this 38-city road trip about 5 or 6, 7 years ago called Rise of the Rest. And what they were looking to say was, what are the characteristics in communities developing strong, community-focused entrepreneurial impact? Now, they didn't come to communities quite this small, but what they picked up was very important. It takes 7 spokes, okay, of organizations and government and education working together to truly create a culture of innovation and a culture of entrepreneurship. And those are your local government has to be involved. They have to have a seat at the table. Your local media. Why is that important? Somebody has to get the word out. Someone has to be promoting and storytelling. Okay, it takes some capital. It takes money. It doesn't take as much money as people think, but it does take money. These tentpole and startup companies, and tentpole companies in a lot of cases is a larger company that because of its needs, employees or ex-employees or other companies can provide services to those companies. So it takes, takes somebody there to say we have a demand for this or that. It takes private enterprise, okay? Private enterprise is very important. Businesses have to buy into this. It takes your educational facility to buy into it as well. And then it takes, in their opinion, innovation labs, places for things to actually happen. And so, I just went through these: local media, startup companies, education, capital, innovation labs, local government. This falls apart if some of these people are not at the table. So it's important as entrepreneurs, small business people, innovators, government, that you make sure that we're talking to the people that might not be at the table and convince them to come to the table and see what's trying to happen, the change that you're trying to impact in your communities, and get them to at least buy in and not be obstacles. So that's those 7 spokes. There's my favorite little graph again. It just floats in there because I like it so much. Okay, you want to see that happen again? It just floats in, okay. So they came back a few years later and they had a conference. And one of the things they found is, what is the role of government and policy in all of this? It's critical to success. So if your elected leaders and your government agencies aren't at the table, it's going to be more challenging. And there's 2 ways that government can be more effective, okay, to help support innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystems. One is create capacity. Okay, now in a lot of rural communities, capacity right now is broadband. That's one of the biggest challenges, but it's creating capacity. It's creating whatever it may need so that things can in fact take place. And secondly, pave the way for sustainable streams of income. Now, no one expects government agencies or philanthropic agencies or nonprofits to fund things forever. So we at Foundry Collective talk a lot about how do you make these locations sustainable. But you can't make them sustainable from day one. They take money to get the build out. They take money to buy desks and AV systems. It takes some time and effort to get people coming into these locations. It takes a lot of work to maybe co-locate and find pathways so you have a pro forma to make these sustainable. But policymakers and government agencies can help a lot up front by seeding these locations and these activities that are taking place. So another thing about government dollars is they typically trail innovation. Government dollars typically go someplace where innovation is happening, and they support that innovation. And they have not traditionally gone in and said, we're going to help you create an economy of innovative activities and thinking. We're hoping that that changes. So what do business owners and entrepreneurs need to be successful? Well, we know that rural innovation is different than urban innovation, but these are pretty consistent across the board. Competence for success. Okay, we had a presentation a couple of nights ago about mentorship, and we talked about how important it is for mentors to be able to deal with this psychosocial side of it, where sometimes you just, you're ready to give up. How many of you have started a business or been somewhere down the path and you're just like, okay, I'm throwing in the towel. I just can't do this anymore. And someone comes along and says, oh, you're so close, and your product, what you're doing is great. Stick with it. That confidence builder to help you know that the ups and downs of a small business, the ups and downs of an entrepreneur, an innovator, a startup person, they're pretty up and they're pretty down. It's not like we have a nice level flow here in many cases. So confidence for success is critical. I recommend you find good mentors that have that skill set, that are great listeners and will help you when you kind of hit those down points. Secondly, a lot of that's based around curriculum, okay? Getting access to more formalized education that will help you learn those hard skills you need to know to effectively run your business. That could be QuickBooks, that could be things that are more around a business model canvas and value proposition, customer segments, but access to curriculum, access to mentorship, which we also like to call trusted guidance. One of the most critical things about having a great mentor is this mutual trust and this mutual contract of how you're going to work together. Also connection. Connection is critically important. The ability for none of you to work in isolation. You learn from each other, you support each other. So if you're not connecting, that's a challenge that's going to make it more difficult to, one, create a culture of innovation. It's also going to make it more difficult for each one of you individually to grow and scale your businesses. Marketing and sales support. We know this is a huge challenge. We did a workshop yesterday that unfortunately didn't get recorded, but I have an old one that I'll make available on traction, the 19 ways to get eyes on your product or service. And a lot of that comes down to there's this gap in some of this technical marketing. There are great courses on what marketing is, and there are great courses on how to use a specific tool, and there are some gaps in the middle there, which we're going to work with our partners to try to help fill. So we know marketing and sales support, particularly in a rural community where your business may not be able to completely be successful based on just what's happening locally. So what do you need to do? You need to attract people to stop here, right? You need to get people to come in from outside. You also need access to larger markets. I'm a firm believer that rural communities need to be thinking a little more regionally, and how do we collaborate with the other rural communities and even 3 county type regions, and then maybe even, this frontier Eastern Oregon collaborates. So those are very important. Credit building. You're fortunate to have some, we had someone here yesterday that has a credit building service. There's credit opportunities through NEO EDD. There's certainly, there's a lack, I believe, of awareness of things like CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions. Here, there are places you can get debt financing, even if your bank can't quite yet give you a loan. So credit building is important because you don't need as much money usually to start a business as you'd think, but you need a lot more money to scale that business than you'd think, okay? Financial management, critical part of this, understanding. I have a lot of people that I've talked with that have great business plans, but they've never really understood cash flow and how much cash they're gonna need, ready cash they're gonna need available as they start to scale. One of the people we work with is a small scale beverage producer, and some of her ingredients are incredibly expensive. And when she went from 8 gallons a week to 80 gallons a week, she was having a real cash flow problem buying raw ingredients. And then also financing. We all know at some point we're going to need access to some kind of a debt funding. If you really believe that you can scale a business without at some point incurring some debt, it's going to be a very interesting business, because most of our margins are not sufficient enough for us to generate enough free cash flow to scale a business. There's enough to keep it going. There's enough to do some things, but usually not enough to really scale it. So financing is important. So these are the things that have been identified across the United States and even in other countries that are critical for business owners and entrepreneurs. I want to talk a little bit about capacity versus capital. We hear a lot, and we have a lot of conversations around the fact that we need to throw more money at the problem. Okay, there's not enough capital available. There are capital gaps, and there also is a lot of friction in the capital system. So it means that somebody may be sitting on $3.5 million, but they either don't know you need it, or you don't know that they have it, or there's some disconnect on trying to get that capital actually catalyzed so that you can access it, okay? I'm also a firm believer that in many cases, the needs for more capital is because we don't have the right amount of capacity. So 600,000 businesses start each year, okay? The vast majority of them manage to get up and running without any angel or VC capital. And for some unknown reason, we continue to beat the drum on angel and VC capital as the solution. Less than 3% of startups get access to angel and VC capital. So that's what, like 18,000, right? 95% of that goes to urban centers, okay? So that leaves like what, 600 businesses across the United States that are in non-urban centers that might get access to angel or VC capital. We hear a lot about it. It's sexy to talk about. It's probably not going to happen in a lot of rural communities. So when I talk, and I want to just go back to this slide, when I talk about capacity versus capital, here's a good example. You're starting a small manufacturing business and you're prototyping in your garage, which is what, 300, 400 square feet. And all of a sudden, winter comes, you need your garage back for a car. And you move to that next stage where you're still prototyping, but maybe you've got some units you want to get out to some of your early adopters, first buyers, and you need 800 square feet. And you go out into the community and you start looking for space that you can be running an air pop rivet gun and some sheet metal bending and things and all of this stuff. And all you can find is 4,000 square feet, okay? So you were hoping you'd be able to rent a space for what, $500, $600, maybe $1 a square foot, maybe $800, and now you've got to rent a space for $4,000 a month. Now it becomes a capital issue. In reality, it was a capacity issue. There wasn't the right amount of capacity for you at your stage in your business. So now you have this cash flow challenge, okay? That happens over and over and over again. Another example is why we talk about shared workspaces. You start a business, you start a home-based business. Let's say an example that I can use is a single mother who's got a jewelry business. Okay, do you know when her business opens? It opens at about 8:30 when the kids go off to school. You know when it closes? Closes about 3 o'clock when the kids come back from school, because her business is being run on her kitchen table, okay? Maybe it opens up again when the kids are in bed for a couple hours, and then we all know how many hours that we work. What if there was a space where there was an available jewelry making bench that she could come into for $200 a month and run her business 24/7 out of there, not have to take the time to clean up and put stuff away and pull stuff back out? What if you're someone that's making greeting cards, and one of the things you would love to do, because a lot of people are requesting, are things with really cool die cuts and, you know, odd, cool shapes. So you need access to, say, a laser cutter like a Glowforge. Glowforge is $5,000. It's a lot of money. How often would you use it? Maybe a few hours a week or a few hours a month. So having access to a Glowforge that you can use to grow your business is huge. Now, hopefully at some point you get so busy that you need a Glowforge wherever you're at in your location. Same thing with shared workspace, just for people that are trying to start a business, need access to high-speed internet, want to be a little more involved with community, because we know connection is so important for success. So innovation infrastructure. Lack of physical resources sucks up whatever capital you may have available, okay? So when the right type and the right amount of capacity is available, small businesses flourish. Part of that's access to broadband. Part of that is access to the right amount of space. And that comes from shared spaces, comes from shared equipment, comes from shared knowledge. All of these happen in locations like this when all 8 cylinders are firing. So this is a little bit different. So this is your community in the center. And again, we've kind of wrapped around some of these resources that need to be playing at the table. A couple more stats here. 2012 National Entrepreneurial Assessment for the United States of America found that 69%, 2/3, start their businesses at home. How many of you started or launched a business kind of out of a home or a small coffee shop or somewhere else? Okay. We've got a little bit lower ratio here than probably normally. They're not solopreneurs. This is a myth, okay? Everybody thinks if you're starting a home-based business, you're a solopreneur, but in most cases, only 1/4 of the entrepreneurs they surveyed for this said they had no employees working for them. Now, does that mean you've got 2 people showing up at the front door of your house every morning at 8 o'clock and leaving at 5 o'clock? No. It probably means you might be using remote workers. You might be using a contract person that you found on something like People Per Hour, or you might be using someone in a different world. But technically, you have people that are helping you with your business, and those could be considered employees. So this myth that a solopreneur is in fact a solopreneur because they started a home-based business is just not factually true. A lot of those jobs and those jobs created don't get reported. And keep in mind that how do we track some of the impact that's happening from all of the efforts going in? We track it by businesses started, we track it by jobs created, and we track it by capital raised, which none of those may be appropriate necessarily always in rural communities. The entrepreneurs that were surveyed in this required about $15,000 to start their business. Now that's a lot of money, but it's not insurmountable. And the bulk of them raised this from their own savings, friends and family, and other, credit card debt and other types of things. So it doesn't necessarily take an inordinate amount of money to start a business, but it takes money to scale that business. And one of the key things was keeping overhead low is a key driver of starting your business and a key indicator of the chance of success. So keeping your overhead low by having the right capacity is critical to success ratios, to the success factors of small startups. Couple things. They found that this social networking and this interpersonal ties and this ability to create new connections was one of the key indicators of success over five-year period of small businesses and startups. So this ability to network, this ability to meet other people, the businesses could be completely different. Your visions could be completely different, but the ability to have shared stories and talk about what you need, as well as, I think, amplify your voice if you're not getting what you need, okay? There's more power when there's 10 or 15 or 20 people in the room saying, we're not getting access to the resources we need to grow and scale our business, and these are what they are, so that our policymakers and our nonprofits and our philanthropic organizations and government can react to those. Secondly, This connectivity and networking is critical to this knowledge exchange. Higher sustainability rate in your business. Okay, so these are important factors that sometimes just don't get measured. We don't have a good measurement for a lot of social capital types of things that have to occur for success and innovation and growth of small businesses in rural communities. We don't necessarily know how to measure connectivity, okay? But yet we know connectivity, based on all of these studies, is critically important. We haven't figured out necessarily how to really measure that. So my philosophy is, why not put people and resources together in a Main Street hub? That's our argument based on a lot of the data that we've kind of gone through and pulled and looked at. So our theory of change is that the creation of vibrant, sustainable, visible innovation hubs in small and rural communities will help support small businesses and entrepreneurs who are launching and growing innovative businesses, and that these centers will help accelerate growth and long-term success. That's what Foundry Collective is all about. So what do innovation hubs do? Well, just one thing, that's not just our opinion, okay? That's the opinion of others too. This quote, startups are unlikely to succeed in isolation, but by creating ecosystems that encourage interactions between entrepreneurs and developing a network of innovation hubs working together, a world of opportunities begins to open up. This is Matt Dunn, the executive director of Corey. He's an ex-Googler. He's on the East Coast doing some really cool things in the Northeast and in Vermont. So Matt's over there. He has the same philosophy that we have, that a network of small innovation hubs in rural communities can have an oversized impact on helping all of you achieve your dreams, generate the kind of business you want to run. So Rural Oregon Main Street Innovation Hub Network, we've started working on this, okay? We have Corvallis Foundry. Now, granted, Corvallis Foundry is not rural. We're in a larger town and we're somewhat urban-centric with Albany and everything else. But Corvallis acts a lot like rural when you pull the university out of that ecosystem. So it also gives us an opportunity to kind of have a place where we can experiment and test some things. So it is our kind of mothership. And I'll talk a little more about it. But we also support, oh look, Ignite LeGrand. We also support Launchpad Baker, Baker City. We also support an effort in Estacada that is another just launching innovation hub. We also support Spark Collaborative Studios in Burns, which launched in November. And we had, I think, the grand opening party in early December. And then we're also working with Coos Bay, with partners in Coos Bay, to launch a location in Coos Bay. So they're all a little different also. So Corvallis Foundry is a nonprofit. It stays open because of earned income. It generates enough revenue in the location from people, from membership, for shared desks, permanent desk, remote workers, and some offices to pay its overhead. It's not completely perfect yet because we really aren't quite big enough. It needs to be slightly larger, so the footprint size is holding us back. We're trying to expand. We have this location, which is a kind of a collaboration between NEOEDD and Ignite and some other people. So that's a little different structure. Launchpad Baker is a nonprofit. Estacada is a couple that owns the Mason Building in downtown Estacada. They have a second floor. Mason buildings are great because they got cool architecture, and they usually have smaller spaces and a big space where you can do a lot of events. We've looked at a Mason building in Lebanon and talked about that one. Also old J.C. Penney's and Sears, which we know there's a plethora of those in small rural communities, are good locations as well. Spark Collaborative Studios is right on Main Street, Burns, first floor. A lot of these locations are either first floor or second floor. Second floor is good because it doesn't necessarily take up retail space. Spark's a little bit different. It's three different businesses that have rented a space, and they have a lot of excess capacity. Okay, and with that excess capacity, they've managed to put in some retail pop-up in front. All of these small businesses with the retail pop-ups, none of them can afford a storefront. They don't have enough income and enough capital to have a store, but they now have a space. Okay, It's kind of a little more creative vibe. You've got someone in there doing textiles, you've got someone in there doing photography, and you've got someone in there doing a little more graphic design and some of those things. So it's taking a little bit different feel. It'll be interesting to see what it becomes as it evolves. Every one of these locations is going to reflect your own unique community needs. So one could be more of a makerspace, okay? One could be more of a tool rental. One could be more of a hackerspace with access to things. A shared commercial kitchen is in fact an innovation hub, okay? What does it do for you? It helps you in those capacity gaps where instead of you having to build a $50,000 commercial kitchen, or if you even can get zoned for one, it helps you have access to something you need as you scale your value-added food or beverage business. And then Coos Bay is a collaboration between Coos Bay Downtown Association, the South Coast Community, Southern Oregon Community College, the SBDC, Oportatis, which is a real estate development company that did a lot of work, I hope I pronounced that right, did a lot of work in Oregon City, who's bought the Tioga hotel there. They're willing to put the money in to build it out. We're looking for funding, hopefully from Business Oregon. Oh, hi. We're looking for funding, hopefully, to help with the first year's pathway to sustainability on one, buying the tables, desks, and all of those, and then making sure that we have some operating reserves for staffing and to put on events and activities. So all kind of exciting, all a little bit different, and all unique to each community. So we have a hub, okay? We have this network going on. It's a loose collaboration. One of the things you'll notice is all of them are on the same, all their websites look very similar. They're all on the same back-end platform that we as Foundry Collective provide and support. And that back-end platform allows these locations to do member management, allows them to handle the billing, allows them to handle the resource management. So if you have conference rooms and meeting rooms, they're all reservable at Corvallis Foundry. You can reserve it on your computer. You can reserve it on a phone app. You can walk up to the iPads at the doors and reserve your space. It also does all of the event management. So all of the events can be put on. One of the other advantages of this is when we post an event like this on LeGrand, we can very easily copy it and move that and post that event on Baker City and Spark Studios and just say, hey, we're live streaming this. So people in other communities. So what are we able to do? Two things. One, we're able to take scarce resources and make it available to more communities. We're also able to demonstrate size. We're able to demonstrate, not that many organizations are interested in one location in one community as much as I believe they'll be interested in a network of locations in a number of communities that are trying different models and finding pathways to success that's unique for each of your communities. And I talk a lot about, local self-reliance. And I believe locations like this are an important part of that local self-reliance. So creating capacity with Main Street hubs. So this is the picture of Corvallis Foundry. These are place-based hubs. They make resources visible. One of the best things about spaces like this is people walk by and they're like, what is that place? They stick their head in, they're like, what do you do? Oh, well, we help connect resources and we provide shared workspace and we hold events. Oh, my brother-in-law is trying to start a business in his basement. He should come down here, or vice versa. The other thing that can happen with resources being visible is, of course, workshops like this, making sure that you get access to the curriculum and workshops and the programming that you need. It also, the number one thing we also know about is what? Connectivity, right? Collaboration, critical for long-term success for small enterprises. They increase that by getting a group of people here together. Some of you may or may not know each other, but you know each other hopefully a little bit better when you walk out of here. It impacts community development as well as economic development. It creates a place where people come together. At Corvallis Foundry, we do events that aren't necessarily only entrepreneurial in design, okay? So we'll do some events that just are community events. We also, in Corvallis Foundry, we have an SBDC business consultant there that's there a half day a week. Does everyone here know what the SBDC is? Great, because it's typically America's best kept secret. So I'm glad that you all know about the Small Business Development Center and the role that they play as business consultants, and you can't beat the cost. okay, because they're free. So we have an SBDC business consultant that has a desk in Corvallis Foundry. So what starts to happen? People who have traditionally wandered into, say, the Downtown Association or the Chamber of Commerce, they're like, hey, go up to Corvallis Foundry and they'll help get you steered in the right direction. People come up, first thing we say is, what are you doing? I'm trying to start a business. Have you met with the SBDC? What's that? Small Business Development Center. Here's Ann Whittington's card. Ann is here Tuesdays from 9 to noon. She has a Going Into Business seminar coming up in 2 weeks. If you can't meet with her at 9 to noon, send her an email. She'll connect with you. And she's meeting with people in our meeting rooms almost every single day now. So we've been able to take the SBDC, which is in a ryegrass field out at Lynn Benton Community College, 11 miles away, and help bring them in so they're highly visible in a downtown location. It also spurs community innovation and entrepreneurship. So having a location like this and getting the community behind it starts to get everybody thinking about innovative solutions. When some people may not necessarily think of themselves as entrepreneurs, some people may not think of themselves as innovators. Having that conversation is valuable. And innovative communities have what? Higher average incomes, lower level of poverty, better health benefits, okay, and a greater success for business starts, which all lead to greater local self-reliance. So having an innovative community is a big, important part of this. I will throw something out about the arts and the makers and the creators and the artisans and the builders, okay? They lead innovation in communities, and communities that support these makers and craftspeople and artisans. And, you know, this could be blacksmithing, it could be watercolors, it could be pottery, it could be leatherworks. Communities that have a strong core around that are generally more innovative communities. So I would encourage you at any time where you can support this class and category of entrepreneurs, do so. And in many cases, they are the class that needs more support from technical learning experience, technical workshops, and all of that, as well as they have capacity constraints that impact their ability to grow and scale their business. They also have challenges getting access to market. A lot of them can't afford to have a gallery or something. So retail pop-ups help immensely. So you can begin to see how this is all interconnected and intertwined. Also, they provide resources to launch and grow small businesses. So this is Corvallis Foundry. One of the things I'll kind of point out here is you'll see that we have a low desk in the front. We have some high desks in the back. All of these things are on caster wheels, so they can all be pushed aside so we can take this major space. These are all permanent desk spaces, okay? We have 9 permanent desk spaces. 7 of those are remote workers. 5 of those are remote workers working for companies outside of Oregon, and 4 of those are paid for by their companies. So we're bringing money into the community because those 4 people could not be working remotely if they didn't have a place to go to. Their companies do not allow them to work remotely from home. So this remote workforce is an opportunity. It's a great opportunity, we believe, for rural communities because we know we have people that have grown up here that maybe now are at a stage where they'd like to come back here, but maybe they're working for an Intel or they're working for some other company. The opportunity for them to have a place to be able to come back to and remotely work for the company they still are working for is huge. They tend to have higher incomes. Their partners or spouses may come here and start businesses to fill in on services or resources that aren't available. So the remote workforce is an important part as long as we have broadband, which we have here. It can be a very valuable part of making one of these locations sustainable, which is what we want. We want these places to be here 5 and 10 years from now. So there's another picture of Corvallis Foundry, a little more built out. I think if you look at this last one, we only had 1 table. We have 2 tables now. To the next one over is Gaucho Collective. They're kind of a loose collaborative party with us, a little bit different look. So Jason down there, we chat back and forth, but we haven't really kind of formalized. This is Launchpad Baker. So they have some more offices down there. And then there's an event. This was a women's entrepreneur event. WITSE, I think we called it, Women in Science, Tech, and Engineering event, which we held. And you can see how we've moved everything out of the way so we have event space. This is Indie Commons, so we work real closely with Kate and talking with that. Kate opened Indie Commons runs her business out of there. Had an incredible passion for creating some innovation. Independence, is certainly urban adjacent, but it's a rural community that has put its stake in the ground to be known for ag tech and is doing so. And I think Indy Commons has been open about 2 years, and it's really been an integral part of helping spur innovation and entrepreneurship there. They hold a lot of events there. Spark Collaborative Studios, you can see that they've got cases in the front where they're highlighting retail. I believe in December they sold about $800 worth of retail product out of the very front of that location. Potentially Coos Bay. Okay, I could see an office right there for like somebody like me with that nice view. And then the conference room at Launchpad Baker, which is full quite frequently. I look at the scheduling there. So it's a resource that's made available. Our conference room, Launchpad Baker's conference room, some of these other ones are made available. A lot of nonprofits meet there. A lot of community organizations meet there. Again, what does that do? It increases connectivity, okay? So it gets groups in the same location that may not normally even cross paths, and now they're all coming into the same location. So how do we make this a reality? Well, we get a group of stakeholders. You're all part of that. Congratulations. Thanks for signing up. That's government, that's nonprofits, that's education, that's for-profits. We get community engaged and involved in this. None of this happens if the community is not saying, we want this, okay? You have to have loud voices and say, we believe in this, we want this, okay? We need to get both the citizens and the businesses that can support this, because it benefits larger businesses to support innovation and entrepreneurship in their community, because it creates both community development, economic development, local self-reliance, okay? Next steps, one, secure location. This location is challenging. This is not, we were talking about this before this meeting. It's not really big enough to do what needs to be done here, okay? So partnerships, how are we gonna work together? Who in fact is going to operate this, okay? We put together a pro forma. We put together a business plan that says this is what it's going to take. This is what the first year ramp up is going to look like. This is where our run rate is. And we believe we'll be at profit, but we believe we'll be sustainable in 18 months or 24 months. We talk about stakeholder expansion. What do I mean by that? I mean, we start with a core group and then eventually we reach out to, county, state, other businesses. Maybe we've talked to some businesses that support locations like this, but aren't even doing business here. Maybe we can get some larger corporations to come in. Maybe we get the banks to be more supportive. So we expand from the small core group to a larger group. We have some community events, okay? Nothing better than talking about what this is and how it can impact the community and get a real rallying cry around a location like this. And then we have a grand opening, have a party, okay? Who doesn't like parties? Perfect. So Foundry Collective, we pulled this from Kaufman. Everybody has a fundamental right to turn an idea into an economic reality, regardless of who you are or where you're from, with zero barriers. We believe innovation hubs, vibrant, Main Street, visible, sustainable innovation hubs will have an oversized impact on the innovative culture within your community. Oops, look, I got that quote twice. I like it so much. What are they? They're shared workspaces. They're places for small businesses to launch. You can incubate small businesses in these office spaces. So you can go from a shared workspace to a private desk to maybe you find a partner and suddenly you're in a small office. Offer meeting rooms. This one is Indy Commons. This is pretty unique. She has this great big shell. And so what they ended up was putting in one of these kind of garden sheds inside it. We're looking at that for Spark Collaborative Studios. It has kind of the same thing. Looking to say maybe someone that builds these would like to put one in there and they can put a sign up and say, this is, if you want one of these, get a hold of me. Obviously event space. And just real quickly, what value do these add? Economic development, supports startups, enables your endeavors to scale, helps uncover hidden resources. So how many you were at the event last night, right? No. Nobody was at the event last night. Oh, you were at the event last night. Yes, absolutely. I recognize you. Sorry. Yeah, so there were a number of resources there, probably some of them that people didn't realize could potentially help them grow and scale their business. So it helps get these hidden resources, which technically aren't hidden, you just don't know about them, and helps get them visible so that you can understand there are programs that are available to help you grow and scale. hire employees, et cetera, et cetera. It creates funding connections. So these locations do in fact help you get connected with funders and understand what you need to do in the stage of your business to eventually be fundable. Community development, business visibility, proves tourism and relocation attractiveness, okay? You wanna come to a community like this and there's a spot where you to potentially be a remote worker, that's attractive. Tourism, you know, if we have a network of these, who knows what that could lead to. It keeps local talent here. How many of you are concerned about people, talented people moving away because they can't find a job, or they can't start their business, or they can't do that? You know, that's a big problem, and particularly when it starts to impact your, you know, your tax bases and your education, and it starts to pull down on your schools. It's a spiral we don't want to be in. And then it provides opportunity for maker spaces and secondary types of capacity filling needs, shared commercial kitchens. We're not even going to go into the rest of this. So Lisa, we can hit the up in the upper corner. We can probably stop the rest of this. I do want to talk about events. How do you make one of these successful? You have lots of events at them, okay? And you keep doing events and you keep making sure that people know there's something going on there. I'm not sure what it is. I don't quite understand it, but it's something. Questions? Yep, awesome. So what's everybody think? Let's go around the table so that everybody has to talk. Start here.
I wonder how you know what kind of space to build.
You don't.
What the demand is for a maker space versus how many desks to have.
You don't.
Yeah.
You don't. You approach this very much the same as you would a startup with a minimally viable product. You try to make sure that the space is flexible so that you can adapt. I was talking earlier, when we opened Corvallis Foundry, we had a lot of low tables, and we had one table, high table with some tall chairs, because everybody said they were used to working like this. We've taken almost all of those out and moved them all up to high tables, because even the people that were like, no, I want to work at the low desk, the minute they started realizing that at one of those higher tables, they could stand and then sit and stand and then sit. So we were flexible in that. Some locations close off their privates, you know, their little single desk spaces. Some ours, we talked about that. Everybody's like, no, we like it open. You can do some studies. So there are some numbers that will tell you that, for instance, based on some census data and some of the other follow-up data, there may be a certain number of people in your community that report as employed, but they don't report an employer's address. Of that, some of those people are in fact remote workers, but you can't really get down and just say how many remote workers do we have here, but you can do some anecdotal, you know, if 5% of the people that are not reporting an employer's address, 5% of those, you know, it could be 25, 30 people, you only need 5 maybe. Maker spaces are a little more challenging because a lot of maker spaces have had kind of challenges to sustainability. But if you're sharing that space and you've got some innovation hub going on and you've got some maker space and you're reacting to that, you know, the fact that Spark Collaborative Studios in a community of 2,700 people is sustainable today tells us that probably in any community, there is a pathway to sustainability. So that wasn't a very good answer, because there is no exact answer to say there's a matrix or a rubric we can drop this into and say this is exactly what this community needs. Part of it is having the community involvement so strong that the community can help inform those decisions. I don't know what this community needs.
Yeah, well, either we're just here to learn about
Okay.
what's available. And
So what is it you need? What's your biggest obstacle?
probably to grow, we're gonna have to find some funding.
Okay. And what would that funding be for? Would that be for capital improvements? Would it be for physical improvements, or would it be for operating capital?
Probably capital improvements.
Okay. And what's the structure of your business? Is it an LLC?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And who are the owners? Okay. So potentially Lisa would be a great person to talk with. And then also community development financial institutions like Community Lending Works, and in talking with Lynn, their director, they have capital available, and they now can, because they have merged into a new organization called Dev Northwest, work statewide. And so, their rates are a little higher, and people tend to get caught up and say, oh, it's an 8% interest rate versus a 6, or it's a 6 versus a 4. End of the day, it's like $16 a month more or something. So I would encourage you to take a look at, not get too caught up in some of those, because they loan to groups that are technically not as bankable. And it's not that banks hate you, but banks have loan committees, and they have certain things they have to do because they have FDIC insurance, and they have to do it. And they could love you, and you could have banked with them for 20 years as a consumer, and you go in and say, I need some money to start my business. They're like, can you give me 3 years of operating documents? However, the sooner you draw your banker in with your business plan, and if you're working with someone like an SBDC business consultant, you're going through classes like what INEO EDD offers, and you're working with a CDFI, in many cases, they can begin to bundle, and you can oftentimes become bankable and get like a line of credit. So you have that as well. So those would be some things that, I would just put in the back of the mind and explore.
I'm gonna pass.
You're going to pass?
I am.
Okay.
I heard what everyone else has to say.
Brian.
So can you talk a little bit about how you go about selecting communities to get involved in? So, I mean, obviously, I think that there's inherent value in this, just about any community, right? For all the reasons that you mentioned, it encourages connectivity, collaboration, creates that isolation, to eliminate some of the resource barriers that a lot of entrepreneurs face. But how is it that you select communities that are sort of primed to be successful?
So the Kauffman grant kind of informed where we're working now, because we're in Burns, Baker City, LeGrand, Warm Springs, Ontario, and Bonita. And all of these have some form of something like this going on. Ontario has a truckers cooperative for the Latinx through Valkyrie. Technically, that is an innovation hub. Okay, it's capacity. It's where do you store your trucks? Where do you wash your trucks? Where do you get access to, educational and curriculum? I mean, it is technically fits in under kind of this umbrella. We get a lot of calls, okay, which we can't handle because we're not funded. We're not big enough. We're not established enough. Estacada came out of a couple-year conversation. Milton Freewater has been talking about something like this for a couple of years. Coos Bay came out of a recommendation through some of the work that RDI is doing down there with the Main Street and the Coos Bay Downtown Association, and they're going through some of their processes. So I think when we step in, where we really want to lean in is where the community is saying, we want one of these, okay? We think this is right for our community. We support it because this is a community-led effort. Okay, and when the community starts to get behind it, then the local organizations see the value because the community is talking about it, and then that helps bring in larger players and regional players. One of the challenges we're having is a lot of the philanthropic organizations don't get what this is quite yet. Okay, and they've seen a lot of little ones come and go and fail, and so philanthropy is just kind of dipping their toe in this. The Kauffman grant is $430,000. That's an incredibly small grant for Kauffman, okay? But it's because Kauffman is rural curious. Now, I mean, it's $430,000 to be curious, but their grants are larger. So that grant is helping us, one, help communities because 2/3 of that money passed directly to your communities, okay? There were checks written and being written directly to the communities to use as they see fit. And part of it is to fund us to come over here and help. And help with however we possibly can and whatever the leadership in this community wants. So communities have to be raising their hand and saying, we want this probably first and foremost. It's real hard to say no, I will tell you that. I mean, I'm working a lot of hours, okay? But that would be, I think, communities that are saying, we think, and then the second part about this is space, okay? These don't work if you can't find a space that works for them. That's a critical element. Because a lot of these have been shoehorned into locations and places that just don't work.
I don't know that I am informed yet enough to have a question. I'm sorry, I came in.
Okay, we'll come back.
So
my position pretty much goes without saying. I really believe in the power of entrepreneurs and small businesses. And I do personally also really understand the importance of an innovation hub like this. And what I guess I'm most curious about is how do you find those entrepreneurs in your community or want to come to your community and make it clear that this kind of space does exist for them? Is it a question of more traditional marketing, or do you really have to approach them? I feel like for a lot of them, it might be a matter of they need to be invited, in which case, how do you find them and get them out of the woodwork and get them into these spaces?
That's a great question because, I'm an innovator, I'm an entrepreneur. I've launched businesses and fast scaling, online businesses in New York City and all of this. And, they always talk about us being we're risk takers, but in fact, we're actually pretty risk adverse. However, one of my favorite movies is Field of Dreams. Okay. So there is a part of this, if you build it, they will come. So you've got these two things. If you build it and you make it high, we talk about being highly visible for a reason. So people walk by and they're like, what is this place? That helps, okay? Because people are curious. They stick their head in and they kind of can either opt in or opt out, or they'll say, oh, yeah, like I said, my brother-in-law is starting a business or something. I believe, again, that connectivity is critical for the success, and that means lots of events. That means lots of listening sessions. That means getting a large, starting with a core group and then expanding that out in concentric circles to where you're talking to a larger community. The entrepreneurs, the innovators are there, okay? Trust me. There are people that are trying to figure out how to take that first step that have great ideas, okay? And they need support. They're there. And so marketing, partnering with organizations that have, memberships and have reach and have, I think, some gravitas, the ability to say, hey, we bought into this, we support it, our members support it, we're spending some time explaining it as well, is very important. As far as going out and finding entrepreneurs, I think that a lot of innovators and entrepreneurs are so starved for resources that they will find you, because they find resources today, and our resource map is scattered and it's really hard. There's a term we use called entrepreneurial pinball, because what happens? Someone comes in and says, hey, I need some help. And it's like, oh, you should go there, because that person's not completely informed, and they go there and then they're like, oh no, we'd love to help you with this, but we don't do that. Go try this person. And then they go there and they're like, oh, it's a great idea, but that's not in we don't do that kind of funding. And pretty soon, what do? You give up. You just become so frustrated because you've gone to 3 or 4 or 5. And then again, they're all over the place. They're all over the map. You're traveling, you're driving, you're dropping in. So part of the philosophy of this is making sure that there is a place that people come and get connected with the right resources. It's not a great answer. So I like to go back to the Field of Dreams. I do believe in a community of this size, if you put it in the right place with the right offerings, it will be successful. And those right offerings will take time to figure out exactly what they are. Baker, again, it's offices and closed in spaces. Personally, I go into Baker and I look at Brian, I said, this is really closed up, and not this Brian who runs that. It's really kind of closed up and cluttered, but I'm used to Corvallis, which has got 14-foot ceilings and skylights and real open, okay? Maybe it is perfect exactly what Baker needs today. Maybe that's what needs to be here. Maybe it needs to be more open and collaborative. Who knows? A lot of it is, as I said earlier, ask the people that are interested and willing to pay what it is that they need. This also helps you create a really good entrepreneurial ecosystem map from the bottom up, and just tracking who's coming in and what they're doing and what they need. How about you?
I have no question.
You have questions? Oh, come on.
Construction company.
I love construction companies, okay? So how can a construction company be innovative in this community?
We're already looking at things to do. We're gathering information. We go to classes here every.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel like I really know you well.
So, but yeah, we're just here gathering information. Really don't have any questions at this point. So.
What's your biggest challenge?
Money.
Okay, so funding. And is that to scale? Is that for capacity, or is it for operating?
It's both. Probably to build first.
Okay. So you're building on spec, or?
Well, it's a long
convoluted story.
They
A new
have
project.
dream. They have a really big dream.
Yeah,
Good. I like big
large
dreams. Look,
projects
you know,
and something-
go big or go home, okay?
Well, we're definitely going big.
Okay.
We don't want to,
No, I'm not asking you
out
to
of that too much.
get any proprietary information, but what do you need? $500,000, $1 million? Okay. All right. Business Oregon has lots of money.
You got a card?
How about you?
Well, I'm from you.
Okay. Oh, so you recognize one of my slides.
Yes, I do.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Trying to spread the wealth.
Anyways, yeah, just first of all, how, our group of artists and small businesses and home-based businesses, how can we use this facility, how we can plug into it today? And how do we eventually go to the next step where we can plug into something that's more for union?
Right.
So those are the kind of things that.
So Union's what, about 2,000, 2,200 people, 2,100? Okay. So this is working in Spark in Burns at 2,700 people. It's being driven by, you know, really 3 entrepreneurs, but with an incredible amount of support around it through Biz Harney and High Desert Partnership and the community really supporting it. They've really bought into it. And, you know, I have a real special place for builders and makers. So the young woman that works for me at Corvallis Foundry and really kind of runs that also works at the Arts Center in Corvallis. And they've received about a year and a half ago a grant through Collins to create an artist accelerator program. So we've partnered with them and looking for grant funding through OCF to take that artist accelerator program and bring that to rural, because we know that, and it will be different. It'll be hybrid, but it's it's designed specifically for the makers and the creators that want to make a living. We're not talking necessarily fine arts. We're talking about people that want to say, can I make a living doing this? Can I quit my day job, or can I take my hobby? I got a side gig I'm selling on Etsy. What's my next step? Okay, how do I get to that next step? And what typically happens in a lot of these is everybody tries to do it by themselves. This person launches a Wix website. This person's on Shopify. This person's on Etsy. This person's on something else. And that's incredibly inefficient. And that's part of where collaboration and cooperation comes into play so that we can get economies of scale. So why can't we have a union artist website where everybody's on that one site and we can have one person that understands how to put product up on it? So we did a Shopify website for the Arts Center. So there were 20 some artists that were all wanting to sell online. A couple of them were online. A number of them were on Etsy. And guess what? The Arts Center has a gift shop. Okay, and they have volunteers that run the gift shop that kind of sit there a lot of the day doing very little. Okay, so we said, well, let's see if we can set up this collaborative online platform. And in most websites, when you're selling on e-commerce, you have categories. You know, women's blouses, men's pants, et cetera, et cetera. What we did was each category is a separate artist. So Julia is a category. All her products that Julia makes shows up below it, and we set that up as literally a landing page for Julia. So it talks about her and what she makes and her passions and everything else. She can use that as her website. She can direct people to theartcenter.com/shop/Julia, and she now has a one-page website where she can sell her products. The Art Center does the photography. She gives them some descriptions and things, and they set it up and they take a percentage of that. So it's not as high margin if she sells it directly to someone, but on the flip side, she's reaching an entirely different marketplace. So there's these collaborative, cooperative type things. And what old is new? This is, in fact, like a Grange, okay? That's what these really are. So what's old is new. They're cooperatives, okay? Cooperatives have been around forever, okay? Cooperatives are the reason we have electricity in rural. So, you know, what's old is new, but it's just kind of a new bent on it. One of the things that we're looking at real closely is how do we extend the benefits of something that might be an anchor in a larger community to smaller communities, and what does that look like? We're playing around a little bit with Monroe in Benton County with that and saying, is that 1 day a week? Is that a pop-up innovation hub? What can that look like so we can at least be having those conversations in your backyard? Because it's not fair to make anybody have to travel. to get access to resources. We have to bring the resources to your community. I mean, I would come to Union and do a workshop if you could get 4 people in a room. Okay? Yeah,
Just a general question.
sure.
Have you spent much time in Eastern Oregon before this?
You mean like growing up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived here.
So, we do a lot of marketing for the hospital, people trying to attract professionals to the area.
Right.
So on and so forth. So, and one of the points was encouraging relocation for businesses. Can you just give me, I don't know, being that you're from the outside, what are some of the things that you think that we should emphasize for our area to attract businesses from the outside to relocate?
That's a tough question. If you asked me to talk specifically about LeGrand, because I've been here a few times over the last couple of years, but this is the first time I've really spent, a lot of time in the community. I can tell you that, if you look at, and there's some pretty good studies out of Maine that were done, because Maine has an economy very similar to Oregon's. It was an incredibly extractive economy, and they had a timber industry, and it collapsed. And now they are looking a lot at the attraction. They're looking at tourism and attraction, and a lot of communities that are on gateways into natural resources are looking at how do we get people to stop and do more than buy gas and a couple bottles of Dr. Pepper. Okay, so there's been a lot of research done in that community, and I talk with Liz Trice a lot, who runs Peloton, which is their largest shared workspace in Maine, and she's done some studies for smaller rural communities. I think, first and foremost, it's a quality of life issue in many cases. Okay, I talked with the vice president of human resources at Intel, who was saying that they were having a hard time recruiting people from Silicon Valley because Hillsborough is becoming such a challenging place to live. And so we were talking about, rural communities where they could potentially technically have an Intel approved location for remote workers. So their recruiters could be saying, how would you like to live in a town of 12,000 people that offers, it's how far away is, skiing at Anthony Lake, pheasant hunting, fishing, natural wildlife, hiking, whatever it could be. So I think emphasizing that. I also believe very strongly in emphasizing culture. Okay, I believe culture sets rural communities apart, and I believe that rural communities that can support the arts and support culture and support makers and builders and innovators and creators have a leg up on the communities that aren't buying into that. It's amazing when you start digging into the economic impact of these areas, what they add to communities, and then oftentimes they get discounted. I was in Baker City, and we were talking with Brian, who runs Launchpad Baker, and he was like, well, I think we pretty much know all these makers and builders and everything. And we went on to Etsy, and I did a search by zip code, and there were like 2,700 listings. And I was like, Alice has looks like the average retail of Alice's products are $45, and she's been on here for 2.5 years. She sold 343 items. Do you know Alice? No. Wonder if Alice needs any help to go to the next level. If Alice is on Etsy, she's paying a lot to be on Etsy. And Etsy tomorrow could change its algorithm, and Alice could be out of business. Okay. So, we started looking through these things and saying, hey, there's a lot of opportunity. Maybe Alice would love to participate in a pop-up retail shop, because they didn't know who Alice was. So I believe quality of life, access to the abundant natural resources around here. I believe supporting the arts and culture, because the people that are thinking about relocating here are probably in locations that they have access to some forms of arts and culture. Arts and cultures also makes you a more innovative community, and the more that your community is viewed as innovation. There's another superintendent, and I thought it was a superintendent of the Baker schools, and it's not, but he said he loved the idea and he was going to start doing it. But in one rural community, the high school is beginning to send out questionnaires to all of their graduating alumni and saying, do you still live in the area? And if you don't, where do you live? And by the way, if you were to move back, would you be interested in moving back here? And if you were, what kind of job would you need? And if you have a partner or a spouse, what kind of job would they need? Would you be interested in starting a business? They're amassing a ton of interesting information from a really simple survey that now informs policy and government and economic development groups and everything else on what is it that we're missing. Why not ask the people that grew up here that moved away that might want to move back what it is that they would need in order to encourage them to come back to this community? I hope that answered some part of the question. I mean, keep in mind, we don't have all the answers. There is no answer. There are some organizations out there telling you they know what rural needs. They're full of something. Okay, nobody has the answer, and each community has its own unique needs, and it requires self-determination. I'm here out of the passion for rural communities and particularly Eastern Oregon and my home state. But I don't have the answers. All I can help is I'll help find the answers, or I'll help connect. And we think that this rural network of innovation hubs helps give the communities that are leaning into this a leg up. That's just what we believe. So how can I help you? We got a little time. I'll answer any questions.
What feedback do you have from what we have here now? You've been here for a few days and met some people from around the community. What do you think you could be doing better or differently?
So I hope I don't speak out of school. I'm pretty direct. Okay, I'm the kind of person that will tell you your baby's ugly. So take that with a grain of salt. If anybody ever is a Seinfeld fan, have you ever seen the Ugly Baby episode? Okay, with Kramer. I think that you are at the cusp of pulling together a group of people here to make something happen. I would like to have seen more involvement from your elected officials. Okay, I would like to see that happen because they're a very important voice at the table to actually move some needles. That's the one thing. Now that just may be that I didn't get a chance to get scheduled in and sit and talk with them. I'd love to come back and sit down with your city council and do a presentation similar to this. This is new. This is not well understood. You start talking about co-working, and now everyone's reading about WeWork and the collapse and all of that. So that I think would be it. The other thing we talked about a little bit this morning is that core of really rabid people that want to see innovation entrepreneurship happen, that are willing to step up to the table and do a little volunteer work to help do more events and activities. Particularly if this is something this community says, we want one of these, how do we make it happen? There's going to need to be a lot of community organizing. So that's going to require more than simply 2 or 3 people. It's going to require a group of a core of 8 or 10 that have some influence to expand that to a group of 25 or 30 or 40. We're working up in Sweet Home. It's been a long haul. When I first started going up to Sweet Home, I swear I needed to wear body armor. Okay. And we've been going up there. Have you been to Sweet Home? Okay. But we worked in Lebanon, but Sweet Home is just that much farther up the pass. But over a year, 2 groups that literally would not talk to each other have been now sitting in the same room and beginning to talk and collaborate and figure out, because the city has said, we'll give you the old city hall for $1 a year if you can get Shedig and the chamber to cohabitate. I was like, yeah, sure, great, okay. Not realizing how hard it was, okay. And here's Shedig in 1,600 square feet, and here's a chamber in 1,100 square feet, and neither facility works for them, and here's an 11,000 square foot city hall, and they're complaining there's not enough space.
What do you typically see from, what is the role that the local city government play?
So I look at government as an incredibly important part of this. Government is deliberative. It takes government usually a long time to move something, but they can move mountains when they do. Sometimes it's just they're at the table and they're giving a blessing for this until they can lean in further. And who do they work for? They work for all of you. They need to make sure that their constituency and their voters, and if they are in fact allocating funds, they're allocating it in the best possible use for the community. We talk about this as capacity because I see a lot of communities talking about building capacity around, a business park or sewage and wastewater and all of those. We talk about this as a capacity thing, so it can be maybe explained a little bit different than something else. Get them to the table, see what they have to say. And then if the community wants it, let them know that you vote.
And just to kind of reiterate So I currently work for an agency right now. We're a little bit more insulated, but previous to that, I worked for an elected official who was involved in making public policy. I can't tell you how informative it is to actually hear from people about what matters, like what is it necessary for you to succeed as a business owner, or whatever enterprise you have, whether it's healthcare, education, whatever. I mean, it helps inform the way that we think about issues. And so, I would totally second what Brad has said, and make sure that you have elected officials at the table, that they understand where you're coming from, and whether it's you're looking for resources from them, or just simple matter of alignment, so they understand where you're coming from. It's important at the local level, it's important at the state level, all the way up. So yeah, and I think also with some of the culture pieces too, if you can get elected officials around the table, it makes it a whole lot easier to get positive stories circulated through your city. You can news articles written about what's happening here, or local businesses that have done really creative things, creative jobs. It's for better or worse, elected officials tend to drive coverage and influence, and so bringing them along with you can be pretty much invaluable.
Yeah, it's a great point. And that's where, if you notice, remember on one of those graphs, media was so important. The storytelling is so important. And keep in mind, if someone's got a side job gig thing and they suddenly go out on their own, they've created a job. Okay, and sometimes we don't even measure that, but that's a job created. And potentially, if they're leaving another job, it creates an opening for someone else to come into that. So it's in that for him. Well, thank you very much for the time. I have got business cards here, and am happy to help and assist in any way, shape, or form. Again, we're funded partially through the Kauffman grant, which is a tremendously wonderful opportunity for us to be over here in Eastern Oregon and to help and lean in any way, shape, or form that we possibly can. Great.
And Sherry, I'd like to follow up with you as well on what you see as possibilities. So if there's ways that happening here, we sure want you to be connected so that they can know that. And also I'm happy to so, yes,
And a watch party is always good. So for instance, the traction workshop that we did yesterday, even though it didn't get audio, Brenda and Tracy, who's with the Burns Paiute Tribe, and Brenda, who's with High Desert Partnership, they have a youth entrepreneurship program that they're working on together. So last night they were together. So they showed an old one of mine of that. So there was kind of a watch party of this. So watch parties are always great too. It's that ability to know who to send an email to and say, hey, we're doing this thing live. It's going to be streamed, or if that doesn't work for you, we'll be on YouTube. Have a watch party. Let's get the links for the worksheets and everything. So I think watch parties, which we're now starting to see a lot more of that with Facebook, is going to become another part of being able to reach out to some real. So if there's someone, have it at your house. Pop some popcorn, open up some local beer, and stream us in.
Or we could host it here.
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Great.
some great ideas, I think. Help small community at the same time. With what's already established. Yeah.
So Brownsville's an interesting, another community. And then I'm also I'm a big advocate of connecting and sharing information. So the city administrator in Halsey is an artist who does a lot in Brownsville, and they're really working on building their, I don't even know what the population of Brownsville is, but it's probably around the same size as Union, and really trying to do some different things there. And, this ability to do more storytelling and sharing and what's happening, because we don't have to reinvent anything. It's all out there on some bookshelf somewhere. Everything we need is there. It's just, we just don't necessarily have access or connectivity to what that is. Well, great. Thank you. Thank you. Hope it helps.
If you want a snack, there's snacks.
Yeah.
It's a little late, but maybe you're hungry by now. Yeah. So. How have you been? Okay.
Brian, nice to finally meet you.
Yes, well, my basement flooded. And so, Wednesday evening,
Wednesday. So, for not next week, but the following 2 weeks, I could probably schedule something.
Yeah, I am.
Actually, I'll talk Oregon Main Street
Okay.
coming in.
Yeah.
Really?
I think,
What are they doing? We don't want another exhibit. And she
Do we? I haven't seen the schedule yet.
I might see her next weekend.
But this is that first priority that came out of that working session.
So sometimes she's at our meeting,
It
sometimes
says
she's
five
not.
hundred,
But do you know?
but
think
they
it's right.
all say, yeah,
I'm gonna miss the part, but
they don't.
this is like a that evening.
Yeah, and I think,
Well, maybe.
they're not,
Right, following that.
none of them are working down here.
No.
And so,
Yeah. Cause I
why
teach
would
there
they?
on
Frankly?
Thursdays.
But I think that,
maybe the mayor definitely.
yeah,
She might be coming in. Maybe we
yeah,
could do
I think
something
it'd be
that
really
day.
good and.
Just let me know.
meet-
And just see what you've got scheduled that day.
Okay, okay, cool.
So you're free,
Yeah, okay.
like, I have to be.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea.
Okay, all right.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, but my schedule is, I
So-
might be, I might have a late afternoon meeting that day, but I don't think I start teaching at 6 in Baker. So actually, like, if I was at
I
3:30,
Well, the thing about,
five.
I was joking with my
I
husband
go.
last night, it was like,
Okay.
there's just supposed
Yeah.
to be such a disconnect between,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know,
to there, yeah.
and
Yep,
he's
okay.
like,
let
Nina,
me,
but
let me see if we can get,
we need downtown to be
schedule something
because when we
joint.
bring people in, they need a place to go,
Yeah.
they need a place to stay.
And that
You
is,
Place to
guys,
eat.
like,
She's
you
a
guys
really
need
great
us
framework.
because
To
of
bring
the
people
events,
in.
to bring
Yes.
people in.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's like,
Yes.
and we're close
it
to
is,
two,
it
and
is all
you know,
similar.
so it's
Yeah.
like, so sometimes I'm like, you know, when you go to meetings, you feel like
Yeah.
maybe it doesn't really, but just us being out there
Yes.
and collaborating and talking to people, I don't always know what to say because I'm
Yes.
an introvert. But just like them seeing us, knowing that we want to help.
yeah.
We need to
wanna
do
be a
your
part.
job and we need to do our job.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
We really need you
Yeah.
to.
So,
We do,
so a
yeah.
couple of things I'm thinking of. One, I do want to send you that you're talking about your convention videos.
Okay.
And
Okay.
but this
Oh,
is
yeah.
then, that's part of my.
No,
project.
absolutely. Yeah.
And Robert understands that we're meeting with people
Yes.
outside of the city.
Right.
So I
Right.
can meet with you on a Tuesday or Thursday.
Okay.
That'd be
awesome.
Okay. And maybe we do that before our members.
So if
Okay.
somebody wants to come in and work here and our member, so maybe
Okay.
it's available.
Yeah, that
Maybe
sounds great. Yeah, we were
Other
just
than
really
that,
disappointed that we
it's
met, we
available
missed
in
the last
Christine or I
yesterday.
here, but it's not a schedule.
Well,
Membership is $50.
Oh, the marketing.
Yes.
So I think what we're gonna do is that watch party.
Oh,
I think that's
good.
a great
Oh,
idea.
good. Yeah, yeah, I
So,
agree.
because there
Yeah.
are a number of people that weren't able to come.
Yeah.
So.
And we were able, we were just forgot about it. We just kind of got busy
well, that
doing
happens.
stuff,
It's
you
okay.
know,
It's
so we
okay.
felt
There's
really
just a lot
bad.
going on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll plan on that.
Okay,
And
yeah,
then maybe we can like webinar and then
yeah.
we have the technology in the room next door
Okay.
Yeah.
to
From
do like a
private
meeting
sector.
you know,
Yeah,
so we can
right,
really see his face
right.
without.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I really wanna look at like what your
Okay.
needs are and
Okay.
figure out the best
So
resource to like you into that next phase. And then the other thing that I see and when she's talking about it and I'm not quite sure how to do it,
Then
but it's
possibly maybe you're having another location
because
that's
there are
under
so many
Brad's kind of framework.
that
Could be,
event sphere, you know,
so
We are,
we're gonna,
you know,
we're
mostly
asking
women.
Brad to do this kind of feasibility study for the grant. And I think.
yeah, and like, we're planning on, we're meeting with.
Honestly, I mean, most of the data that's available is.
Oh.
I'm county, so we're talking, and then we're.
But maybe I'll ask specifically if there's.
Oh,
some pop-up
fun.
Um,
And festival?
yes, in August, so that's kind of what we're,
So
like, instead of trying to do it the following year, because it just takes too much to
could you do
get.
it as a fundraiser?
I don't know.
So-
What does that mean?
So I So I decided to think about other people that can partner with us. So I took it to the Main Street Development Committee and they were excited about it. So one of the things that we really want to do is they're trying to connect the Havertys and downtown.
Okay,
Right?
yeah.
So the grand staircase is a physical asset that is literally missing apart. And to try to do some fundraising for them, I mean, that's part of with a concert is what I was thinking. And we were thinking more of a rock concert, and I really like the idea of a jazz.
Yeah, so Matt Hoopers, who we're meeting with on Friday.
Okay.
So that's.
And you know what, and two, if we open it up more like that as a fundraiser, there would be volunteers to
Yes.
sell tickets and
Yes.
take tickets and
Yes.
do some of that work that's gonna take.
Yes,
Because we're
exactly.
applying for
But
the,
it's not.
You know, it's too.
Oh, through the chamber?
So, you know, we're missing a.
It's far, I just read it,
Oh, through the chamber. There's no
Yeah.
grant.
yeah.
Yeah.
We've got some-
Yeah.
I thought it was 1,002, but it
because we were
said,
thinking they could pay for the market, that could pay for the marketing. You know, that was kind of what we
Right.
were.
so I wanted
Okay.
to talk to you about that because it's like,
Yeah.
we kind of need more than
That's my favorite.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's nice, but it really,
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Yeah, okay. well,
But, I mean, if you really do want to help
I will,
downtown, you
Yeah,
know, make it,
okay,
because Main Street Business Development is willing to help
okay.
support something too.
Okay.
And I wanted to do it. So I think that commercial fire doesn't realize that they have built an outdoor concert venue.
Yeah.
Because they have that huge garage with
Yeah.
that array,
Yeah.
yeah.
and then
Yeah.
that lawn,
Yeah.
grassy area.
Yeah.
And I can never remember the manager. He is such a nice man. Yes. Yes. Well, so I asked my this woodworker, and he was like,
I mean, there was
Like,
business that's still there,
Yeah.
but not there.
Well, as long as ours is over at 11, we're okay.
right,
You know.
right, so you guys
I
should
should
do
do it
something
from this
like
side,
that.
she had
Yeah.
business on the right
Yeah.
side of the store.
So, and
house
the
that-
gal, we have a gal, that used to help us staff Ignite,
No,
Robin,
not
she
her.
went to a
So
lot
this
of
one's
the
like
partnership. She's interested in helping organize
Okay.
something too.
Okay.
And I think she's still doing.
Maybe we can get
business
together and
Yeah.
organize
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have
Yeah.
the date marked out for August 15th
Oh,
at
okay,
this point,
okay,
is what,
okay.
because we're,
Well,
Because we're
still.
going.
yeah,
oh,
Or, you
right,
know,
yeah.
okay.
so,
Well,
With part
let
of
me
that
know how it
business,
goes with
but just
that.
okay,
And then
With another
I
retail
didn't talk to the business development committee.
okay.
And we were supposed to have a grand staircase committee meeting tomorrow morning, but that got
Yeah.
canceled for something. I also have to talk to you.
Yeah.
Since they own it.
Yeah, yeah.
That is, you know what she's talking about?
No.
I didn't drive by it on the way.
No.
Are you kidding?
It's like 6th Street at the end.
It's, Ninth Street.
Ninth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
It's pretty
Eighth or
close.
ninth, it is, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, so
If
I
it
found
wasn't
it,
there, I'd go, go down here.
I
Yeah.
found it when I first came to town, because I was trying to find a place to live. And so I'm driving around looking at houses and what is that?
Yeah.
Because it's so beautiful, and it was this piece of architecture that was, there's only two, even one, we're one of two in the country. And the architect that designed it after.
You got-
a
You're
staircase
excited. You're
because
excited.
we looked out
Okay.
over
And
the
you know, it's just
valley,
like-
of course, it was like 100 years
Yeah.
ago, right?
Yeah.
Literally 100 years ago.
And I'm glad to hear you're growing your business.
Thank you, thank you.
You'll have to come to Union someday.
It reminded me of my Tuscany, the valley did, and so it inspired him to create a Tuscan style staircase. But it's, I just love it,
Yeah.
but it literally is falling apart. Oh, yeah. Even just since I've lived here, it's really deteriorated in just 4 years. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, oh, yeah. Okay,
Oh,
so
no,
first we'll have
so
our
much
meeting
fun.
on Friday
Okay.
and then is the next week Spark?
Yes.
Ignite or?
Yes, wait, it's not this week, is it? Is it Tuesday?
Today is
Today's
Wednesday.
Tuesday,
No,
the
when
11th.
is the third?
Third,
Next
yeah.
Wednesday, next Tuesday.
Oh, no, okay, so Spark is next week.
Anyway, so
Oh.
we'll go Friday and then we'll come Tuesday.
Okay, that'll be perfect for me.
Okay.
Let me look at my calendar.
And then we'll meet with you after.
Yeah,
that correct?
I
Okay.
think that'll work.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, is it? Oh.
And it looks quite different.
Yeah, it looks
in the
better. Yeah, it looks better. We started on the chapel out at the farm.
You
so,
did?
But yeah, so we're
Oh, how
excited
cool.
about it. Yeah.
Oh, that is really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, have you guys talked to the county about your plans? Like, just what you want to do with your expansion? Can you do that with the zoning?
Through agriculture, we can. I know. So anyway, what we need to be working on is for them to open up the thing where we can only have one event a week and it has to be a wedding.
Oh, right now it has to be a wedding?
Right now it has to be a wedding.
Oh.
This is
But
our.
That's our challenge.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
through agriculture, we can do more. So that's kind of what the
Oh, like the farm
jazz
to
thing.
table.
Yeah.
How do you make
And
jazz?
then, well, just the food,
Oh,
you know,
okay.
the
Okay.
food that we're gonna
Okay.
have,
yeah,
and,
that'll be
you know, that kind
So-
of thing.
The other thing I'm thinking, I don't know if you guys want any help from outside. It sounded like you had a lot of contacts of people you were working with on that part. But this family that I work with in Dayton just threw the most beautiful farm to table dinner.
Oh, yes.
And they did it in their barn
Okay.
with their tractors still there.
Oh, really?
I mean, it was,
Yeah.
but the dinner itself was just beautiful and
Okay.
the organization of it was fantastic.
We would really love to go.
Yeah,
one.
I've
Oh.
signed up for a couple down there, but
Okay.
they're,
This was Dayton, Washington. So
oh,
it's probably
yeah,
closer.
that's the one that I wanted to go to, but when I
Oh,
was on
really?
their website, it sounded like they had it the last couple years, but maybe not last year, but they had it like.
Oh,
in
which one
17,
was it?
18. There's 3 brothers, I think, or
Yes,
something.
yes, that's them.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I
Yes.
can't remember what it was a while
Oh.
ago after we had talked about that.
I have their names.
Okay, anyway,
Because one of them was
so I've
like,
signed up for a couple to get information of when they're gonna hold them, but
Okay.
they haven't decided dates until February, so I'm kind of just
Oh.
waiting for an email. Cause I want to attend a couple of them, like,
okay, let me find his.
Just to get some ideas.
yeah, to get some ideas and
See how it looks. and
Okay.
see.
talk to
So-
people and
So each of the brothers farm something different.
different, right?
Okay, so Bill Warren has the apple orchard, and it wasn't, he helped organize it, but it was at his brother's farm. So, his number is 509.
Yeah, hold on, but
And if you'll tell him, just use my name.
Okay.
And if you can't remember who I am, say, she used to be the port economic developer.
Okay,
He'll
okay,
know.
so 509.
382-4205.
382.
Yeah.
4205.
And
And what's
he's,
his name?
Bill Warren. And then his brother Gene, I think it was actually at Gene's house. So Gene farms garbanzo beans.
Okay.
So his number is 509-520-1278.
Okay.
And they have a video series they did on, they had a reality TV show.
They did?
Yeah,
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
yeah. It was like Farm to Future or something like that. And it's really fun. So if you have a chance,
Okay.
like, I don't know, they're like half an hour shows. If you have a chance to watch it before
Yeah.
you call them.
Okay.
I mean,
I will do
they
that.
were just, it's just
Farm
so
to
fun.
Future,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And it features the, it was just like, oh, this is so awesome.
Okay.
The guy that's sitting
Oh,
right here at the
yes.
corner.
Brian, so, I think probably the person that we need to connect you to with the
Okay.
who spoke last
Okay,
night.
right.
He was the
Right. Yeah.
Big guy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay.
So he's our local
Okay.
person,
Okay.
so
Okay.
that's probably.
Because they were talking about rural, it wasn't just urban.
Right.
It's just downtown.
Yeah.
No, he is our person that covers the
Okay.
whole area.
Okay. Okay.
And he's really good at really hard to get a hold of,
Okay,
so. That's why.
okay, perfect.
So, yeah.
Yay. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Christine, you've been
Yeah,
amazing.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
guys. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, thanks.
And I love this idea. I can't wait to find out how that
Yeah,
Friday goes.
for
Yeah,
sure.
that would be really fun. And I just came into another work session. I better check with my boss.
In your spare time, what do you do?
Well, I don't.
Yeah.
That's my problem.
Do you want us to help you like set everything back or?
I can't remember what we have after this.
Okay.
I actually, Lisa set it up this way and I kind of like it. Okay. I don't know.
Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah.
You can kind of see everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I might leave it like that for short, but I can't remember what's in between.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming, guys.
We need something written that we can identify an organization. So we either have a template, we would create a template for perspectives. So we really small business advocate.
Oh,
She goes out to where that office, that's where a lot of this got driven. It's still, there are states that are using it, it's incredible.
oh, there are. Yeah, Washington. A lot. Yeah.
It's still sitting there, so, we would reach into that and grab that and try to read it.
So that format is my. Community of four.
So you can do a couple of things, so you can go to what they can try to push it, and you can do it. Which is something part of that would be big level. So there are some, I've got a cooperative. So this is really talking about all non-profit, can do with non-profit cooperative. There are some rules, a lot of them, we can operate in Colorado, and Washington, and cooperative. So there's higher policy.
I'm more interested in.
Or are you interested in operating section?
Yes, yes, yeah, instead of a cooperative, I don't really.
There certainly are reasons, it's very hard for a cooperative, because you have to have a certain number of people that will actually sign.
Right. Well, I think the other thing was, we didn't want to have members who wanted to get open to things like that. Utilize it, but have local investors, right?
The real estate investment trust is really interesting.
Okay.
And that's, they really do in practicing. People take bigger investors, some of them don't make this very big chunk. But yeah, coordinating growth.
Yeah, I'm not interested in writing perspective. I spent a good time for County Washington at their community and store. And what they did was form a group of initial investors, but then put all of that together and went out and did the stock sale when it was ready. This year, also the people in California.
The other year with the fact that we only create like the 250,000 factors. Also, with your qualified. So the rule was revised.
I should talk to you about what.
And then for towns, the next is.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
Interesting model too, because they started talking about ESPBC, the SPBC contracts now. You know, how to find people who move into the SPBC. It's a small, it's another one of these small nonprofits who love that.
Yeah.
But he's out of.
Okay.
What towns are pretty cool?
There. But,
Green Hill Village.
well, I put that in because when you introduce them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, oh, good, yeah.
So,
So our council,
hey, lean in more.
yeah. The council just,
You.
they just selected, business support as our number one goal for economic development. But they rate entrepreneurial support as low. So they're not. Right, exactly. So, that's where we can, but I've already got that. So I need to talk about what's in there. Yeah. I mean, it's so obvious. I
That there's a resource available.
I know.
to
Paid
help
for, funded.
And maybe they would agree to it.
Yeah.
And help support it.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of depends on what they
Yeah.
take away from it.
Yeah, well, and I did have, Corinne came up after the last, budget retreat that she did at Father's Day, the mayor just said Father's Day is a volunteer, and just all the class, so that's 4 out of the 7.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was, yeah. And Mary Ann is like Main Street, huge volunteer every year for Oregon Main Street. So she was one of the last partnering this week, so.
So an interesting thing that happened in the street, I don't know if it's the same, there was some city council and some city work in that organization, but we had a set for locked in. And the city manager rate comes through and. They come in-
Oh, that's not.
Yeah, they come into it and collaborate with it, but it's pretty good and fun. And that seems to be working pretty well.
We had that.
And I think we're starting to get to a point now where
It's been a while.
hopefully we can be able to start to partner with some of these things. Absolutely.
Well, and I think Brian McCowell was
Yeah.
really, Brian, I mean, that, you know, is a big challenge. But he's fantastic when I can get him. Yeah, 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 yeah.
That really, that's, you know, every other one that our parents own the pioneer too, so it's actually, you know, so you know, she turned out the best dishes that you can find. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
It's been nice to see you. Over the next time.
Yeah, I'll, again, well, Donna definitely is supportive, so she's been a great advocate.
But, you know, this is very similar.
Oh, yeah. I haven't talked to Paul about it, but he may even have one of those. Yeah, he is. I just haven't done one. Well, he was on, but I was on our committee, and he was.
And you know, the other thing is, a couple of years ago, we were still, you know, right, a lot has happened in 2 years. And in fact, I can put up 6 locations and say, look, we're collaborating very closely.
Yeah.
That's pretty unique in the country. So, you know, expect things to the side, expect it to be one place. So we're going to take out now. And we can talk about it in a way. We can go through specific places that we are in the years. You know, the big project is 3 days. So we're going to be in the recommendation for that day. Spot, doing something like that. So we're going to put that aside. We now know these are the right location in the right place. It'll work. We proved that. We proved that model. We proved that model, okay?
No pressure.
And that's what, yeah, no pressure, that's what entrepreneurship and innovation is about, is failing fast, so you can succeed sooner. You know, that the effort in deep day is just something that and I think part of that also is being kind of yeah, and talking with we're fortunate, you know, that we had this last statewide gathering of for that thing, did it for that.
So, that would be it.
I have not had Greg be overly,
He is. But he is talking to us.
and he's talking to me, which is good, I mean,
So we are actively sending clients out.
I think our relationship and how it's working very with Denise is helping too, because that's, you know, we have our lane. But there's so many organizations that have their lane, their mission statements about the good and everything else is true. And I think with our lane, it's becoming more clear and saying, hey, this is how we will, that concern and friction is going away. I think that's going to be the first project.
Oh. Well, and that's desk to start collaborating.
Yeah. Desk.
Yeah. So, I mean, we had a great first step. First step is really understanding. And there are speakers.
that argument today, it's like with Ryan, just struggle with it. It's easier to trace it. But well, they built, first of all, the community colleges all got built in the cheapest possible manner. Right grass field and up on the hill, those things driving. Nobody knows it there. So the isolation can go. Entrepreneurs really. We have the 14th Street Road in Corval, really close.
Well, I think my experience would be. They were not.
But they're entrepreneurs.
And they're so relieved that when they're in my classroom, they're not in school. I mean, it's like, this is a different way of potentially learning and doing what's going to help them, as opposed to pleasing somebody else. I mean, if the school systems are set up for one type of student. And so I get it why you don't want it. I mean, so many of them are like, that's not my place. Not where I'm not going. I haven't really looked at it that way. That doesn't make sense.
And when it put out areas, was Charlie was still high. Even though they have a facility that's most of it's the same thing. But she goes, going into business class. Thank you very much for all of that assistance. It's kind of cool. I mean, StreamYard, well, the ultimate idea is to figure out how to use StreamYard and the equipment needed for all of the locations so you can stream now. So we can do it with phone. We can't do StreamYard on a phone for the start, but we can have 5 people come in on the phone. We can have both people come in. So we can do all sorts of things that with the technology. We're working on this that direction. And then we also, we have an online learning platform, which we are, we're trying to put the worksheet for the tracking. That almost already live, so we can do that, and then we can sit down and go through the instruction workshop. Make sure that we can do all the things out. But really, our business is cool. It has a significant yeah. So technically, so we can go through that. We can connect with the influence to help them more what we're trying to do for messaging. Okay, so we've got this ability to have this private channel where we know what's going on with this information. And understand what that is, and that's what it's about. So that, because you're not going to have all the measures, you don't have a framework. But showing her, she's done more about 3 months for small little startups. She was the lead counsel for Maytag, global IP. Okay. She was a partner, we brought a vacation on the yacht, and they did the website, and she took her package, she's still making a lot of money with some of her, global clients and stuff, but she did our trademark. She did Brian's trademark, she did Brian's, which is Cassie's.
Yeah, so that
Introduction of Michelle.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Are you in the area?
I kind of think it's going to help.
Oh, okay.
I'll send you what mine. Yeah, there's every chance. pushing for this month, she's now pushing for May, I'm gonna try to. This is sort of, we'll continue to have to do So Leah and I are gonna do that. Because I've met her at Baker. Yeah, I think we were all there. About, since I'm driving through there, I'm like, you know, I just stop and do a workshop and talk about something like this and keep driving through. And I look great. Rome coffee is very slick. It is the Rome coffee is the quintessential entrepreneur stuff because it's got a little bar, wine bar, it's got coffee, it's got textiles, it's got pottery, it's got candles. The woman has put every possible thing in there you can possibly sell to make the place work. And it's just, you know, it's, you walk in, it's probably not much bigger than here, but it's got a, you know, every 21-year-old is working far back corner, there's a coffee.
Great. Well, and that.
Okay.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I wanted to go quickly, I would go on the road and then maybe probably. But if I want a more interesting drive, I would take her, go to Sumter, or maybe someday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then find out.
And I would guess that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so warm.
Yeah.
There might be a few spots where it's shady because of the
Yeah.
corners and I was kind of over, kind of considering.
What's the north, the north corners?
Yeah.
Let's go,
Okay,
let's
that
go
one-
like this.
That one's
So
sad.
let's watch.
And I was in something meant like this expedition, which is like 12 tons, so I wasn't too worried about it. But I'm like, okay, this is a little bit bougie-like.
Okay.
I'll do what I go.
Thank you.
Do you need help?
I'm good. I'm gonna eat some more,
Okay.
have some more cheese and crackers, or carrot, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, the carrots with the horse, because you should put carrots with horse and cheese, because horse and cheese is fairly dietetic.
I didn't spill on anything.
So how was the live streaming on your phone?
I think, well, do you have a copy?
Yes.
I think it was fine. I don't think anybody joined my party this time. I don't know. Last time I did it, oh yeah, like 20 people.
The other thing you can do is you can take the recording and you can do a watch party from the recording,
That's what we're gonna
which is really cool.
do.
And I
Or
think that's relatively new.
I just want to